Okay, welcome everybody to the meeting. I'll ask Pam to call the roll.
Committee Chair Yang,
Here.
Regent Jappanen,
Present.
Regent Santiago,
Present.
Committee Chair Yang, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Can I get a motion to adopt the agenda?
So
You have
moved.
a motion.
Second.
Okay, one of you second, please.
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. Motion carries. Agenda is adopted. First order of business to approve meeting minutes from January 13, 2025. I'd like to call for a motion to approve those meeting minutes from January 13, 2025.
Motion to approve the meeting minutes.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Any opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. Motion carries and the meeting minutes are approved. All right. First item on the agenda is a policy update from our interim CIO. I will hand it to you to provide the update on the various policies that you are updating.
Thank you, Regents. So if just as a point of reference and for the record on this meeting, I'm going to say there's two policies that were in flight. One is a rewrite of a security policy that governs the sort of security system-wide, and the other is an AI policy to provide guidance to faculty and other constituents within the community around artificial intelligence and its use. Both policies have been worked on amongst the CIOs and the CISOs across the system. We got them to a suitable form to begin a broader distribution for comment. They are now all actively engaged in the policy process at the various institutions. Typically, what that means is they go to the academic senate, or at least a key committee in the academic senate before they go to the academic senate. I have already had 2 meetings with different Senate representatives on both policies to sort of brief them on what the context was, what our thinking was when we were developing them, and what we expect the process to be as follows. Now, just for the record, I will let you know what I think the process is that we'll follow. The first part is that we will gather information from them because they need to react to elements of those policies. The good news is that the policies were relatively well formed, and that it's much easier to edit than it is to write, and so they're in a good position to react to those elements. We will use information from the various academic senates to make any course corrections. The next step in the process after the academic senate will be to publish them fairly broadly for comment. My expectation is that while we will always get some comments when we do it very broadly, I don't anticipate substantive pushback or substantive problems. I'm hoping, well, I expect that any problems that we establish will be identified in this second round of review. And then once we've done that, the next step in the process will be to put them before the board, well, through this committee actually, and then to the board for ratification.
You're on mute, Chair Yang.
Oh, thank you. Okay, no, that's good. So I do want to get an update, just a once over on those policies themselves. Are you ready to do that?
What do you mean by once over? I'll do it. I'm just not sure what you mean by that.
Well, I mean, I literally want you to walk through just some of the highlights of those policies in the revision that you last talked about, because this is a much broader audience than
Sure.
you have in those cases.
Okay.
And again, I want to make sure that the maximum number of people are hearing what we're trying to do here.
Okay, so let me start with the security policy. Right, we had initially done a review of the security policy, and we had done an assessment on its efficacy within the community. And the feedback we had received was that not just from the board, but from the community itself, was that in its current form, it was, for all intents and purposes, unimplementable. And that the various the CSUs and across CT State, they found that they weren't in a position to understand it. They found it was extremely difficult to understand, and even the parts they understood, they were not clear on how they would be able to execute against the policy. And this was actually the feedback I'd received from the board as well, that this policy was difficult from that perspective. So what we did was we took and we started with a clean sheet, and we pulled some information out of the original policy, and we took some best practice from some other policies from other institutions, and we built a policy that was intended to be written in plain language and that dealt with the sort of the key elements. These are the things you can do. These are the things you can't do. It was less NIST centric, so it was less of an auditing document, which one I think I would make the argument that a policy shouldn't be an auditing document, right? That auditing documents and policies are two different things, and that the original was much, much closer to an auditing document, and therefore as a policy, it was very difficult. And so we wrote this specifically to be much more implementable. And I believe we did make it much more implementable. And the feedback I got from the other CIOs as they weighed in then and we made changes to it, is that it is much more understandable. It's written in very plain language, that's the first policy. The second policy was.
Let's just pause right there. Hold on a second. Pause right there.
Okay.
Okay. Any comments from the regents
Sure.
on the security policy? Has everyone taken a look at it? Have you all seen it?
I
Yeah.
did see that it came through, but I haven't had a chance to like super dig into it, quite honestly. I guess there was a problem with my, anyway, I have it now. I haven't had a chance to dig through it.
Okay, fair enough.
I
And
still need
on
to look
that-
at it as well. I need to look at it as well, so I'll check that out.
Okay, regarding timing on that, Michael, so when do you expect that the security policy to be kind of through the revision round that you're doing with the various faculty and schools?
Well, so far, all the feedback has been around respect for the process. And I think we've done due diligence on respecting the process so that the academic senates can weigh in. When I met with, I joined Walter Schwartz, he's the CIO from Southern, and I met with the academic senate very, very recently. And he also weighed in on that meeting, indicating that the policy was much closer to best practice as they would see it, and it was much clearer. And so he's providing a lot of support there. I'm expecting that's not the one that's going to be controversial. I expect this one to be that they will have read it. They'll find that it's relatively clear to them, or clearer to them, hopefully clearer to them. And if they have issues with implementation, we'll deal with those downstream. So right now they're doing it. They're asking me for some time. I'm telling them, look, take a few weeks if that's what you need. And then really my intention is to do a quick round, another draft of it, trying to incorporate as much of that commentary, and then to go out immediately publicly with it. And then we'll gauge the timing from that, right? If there's a huge groundswell of feedback from the community because we've missed some key elements, then that will delay us because we'll have to make more substantive changes. But I'm not really expecting that. So I think I'm trying to get this to by the end of this fiscal year. I'm trying to get through, because I'm trying to time this where has to go before the board as well. I know there's a lead time we have to do for that as well.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. We should go for that timing, right? Because obviously getting this in place for the next school year is critical. So, okay. All right. Thank you.
That's what I'm thinking.
Okay. On to the next.
Okay, on to the next one. So the second one.
Well, actually, I just quickly have my hand up. Sorry, I just have my hand up.
Thank you.
Listen, I just to be clear, at least from my perspective, and I'll leave it to Sophia to see if she agrees, but I don't think any moving forward progress needs to wait on my review of the policy. I think we gave pretty clear direction on the improvements that were needed. Sounds like Michael believes that those improvements have been made, and I trust ops to go forward with that. But the ability for it to be enforceable, clearly understood, streamlined, so it can actually get what we want. I think those are the inputs, both on this one specific and broadly from a policy standpoint. If Michael feels good that he did it, I'm happy to look at it at some point, but do not wait on me.
Well, if I can respond to that, thank you. I appreciate that. You have time, right? Because there's still another rewrite, and I don't expect substantive changes. I'm hoping there's not going to be substantive changes. But if you have any serious issues with any part of it, whenever you identify that, just let me know, and we'll incorporate that. The fact that it's now out in the community from the academic senate's perspective, means that they expect changes, right? Because they expect to be able to make contributions, or if they raise concerns that they're going to be addressed. So it's okay if we continue to make changes, even, going forward up for a while more. It'll only become problematic after it's really gone out very public. If we then have to make substantial changes, that'll be a big delay. But I would say anytime in the next month, is totally fine, and will not cause any difficulties in incorporating any adjustments.
Appreciate that and understood. I'll just leave it at this, and Sophia can ring in if she feels differently on her end. I think you guys are the industry experts, know the business, have the experience. So I'm gonna refrain from any specific comments on the policy itself at this point. I'm good. So I'll
Okay.
look at it as for awareness, but I don't anticipate sending any comments.
Okay.
Cool.
I would like to see it. So I would like to see
Sure.
it just in case, all perspectives, just to see if I can put my perspective out there. Um, so I actually was that emailed to me, Ted? With
It would
your
have come from
policy
Michael. This is from Michael.
Yeah, so I
from
put
Michael?
in the Board of Regents in the chat in the
Okay.
Teams channel for this meeting.
Okay. All right.
And
Thank
I'll
you.
I'll forward it both. I'll forward it to the committee just so everyone has it. It's draft 3.
Yeah, I would appreciate
dated,
that. Mhm.
February 26th. I'll forward that to the committee right now.
Thank you.
Good. Okay, on to the next.
Okay, so the next one is somewhat different in terms of the context, and so I just want to touch on this a little bit. Originally, this had started as primarily a security policy. So the generative AI policy started out from a mostly security perspective. And let me volunteer something that I think is helpful to think of along these lines. From a security perspective, the big risk around AI is in people unknowingly utilizing privileged or confidential information that they submit to some service. And they do that for the purpose of getting, obviously, something back. And if that service doesn't have a contractual relationship with the institutions that prevents that information from being incorporated into the model, then that information ends up being incorporated into the model. Now, from a policy perspective, that's already a violation of institutional policy, right? So there's already an obligation to protect confidential data and to use that data and to protect it as is appropriate. And so, if you do that today, you are in violation of policy before we've written any other policies. And so I just want to from my perspective, that particular aspect of it is largely one of education, that people don't necessarily understand that risk exists. And they don't necessarily know that there are things or that there are contractual agreements. For example, if we form one with Copilot, with Microsoft, that would be a choice. And that would be done in a way where it would be restricted in that regard. And so we did incorporate that into this policy. In the process of working on this policy, I went out and I looked at other higher education, what other institutions have done, and they incorporated more perspective in the policy. And what they wanted to do, typically, I believe, and I think I've tried to capture that in this draft of the policy, is to really try to let faculty know that it isn't just this security aspect. There's elements of, are you trusting the information that comes out of it? And also we have state obligations that if you're utilizing AI in decision-making, right now, there's a statutory obligation to make that clear, right? That can't be, in effect, a hidden activity or a hidden dynamic. It has to be clear. And so we wanted to make sure that these elements that go above and beyond just the security aspect of it are in this policy. This policy is less well-formed than the security policy. And the reason is because it has more, it's newer in terms of I'll call it the state of the industry. And so there are some elements of it that I would say are not completely formed. I wanted to make sure that it went out and we would get feedback, at least starting with from the academic senate, so that we could form those elements. And, there are placeholders in there. There is language in there, and there are notes that basically say, look, this piece of it needs greater clarity. And frankly, I need that from the academic side of the house in order to properly do it within the normal institutional processes. So that's the history behind that policy. And frankly, when we were putting the policies out, the policy that people were looking for, and I would even say anxious about, was this policy, was the AI policy. And one of the key perspectives that I've already gotten back is there's a great deal of concern and some trepidation within the community that in effect AI is going to be, for lack of a better description, outlawed, right? That you're not going to be able to utilize AI technologies. And in effect, we were out in the back room writing a policy to prohibit the use of AI at the institution. Now that the policy is in the academic senate, I think they can see that that's not even remotely what the policy is trying to do. And so I'm hoping that we will begin to get ahead of some of those concerns, especially when it goes out publicly for this next, we're in round 2 now. When we go to round 3 and it goes out publicly, I think people will see that that's not the intention of the policy. In fact, it's just the opposite. The purpose of the policy is to make it clear what people can and can't and what should and shouldn't do with respect to AI, what their obligations are, what the risks are, and that they can, so that they can use it, right? That's the purpose of it. And that's where we are in that policy.
Yeah, which is good. And I think being clear and disclosure is a lot of what is in there as well. There's no mandating other than following the privacy rules and, FERPA rules and things that we've just previously discussed. A lot of this is about being explicit about use of AI in your classroom or not. And again, I think this is perhaps a learning exercise for all of us. We haven't revised or built, I think, done policies of this magnitude for quite a while. So there's a whole kind of new mode we got to get used to doing here. Okay. But anyway, any comments from the regents? Yeah, Sophia?
Yeah, my only thought here is that when you have the policy that you also have ways in there so that people can understand what they can do. I know you mentioned it, but examples, like really detailed examples and how it can be used and how it can be leveraged to actually to help them along in their path, to actually see the positive aspects of it as well as with the security, as well as this is what you can do, and by the way, this is an example of this, because I think that's the way of really just training how to use it and how to be familiar with it, and how, because it's not going away. It's not going away.
We don't
So
want it to go away.
we don't want it to go away, but we want to be able to have people using on from a greater height, like, you know what I mean,
So let
broader
me just
perspective.
Let me just touch on that briefly then. So the way I think of this is you have policies, you have standards, and you have guidelines. And the policies are generally a little less specific. In fact, they're generally less specific. And the policy gets ratified at the board level, and that's what we'd expect. And normally, standards are written consistent with the policy, which are much more they prescribe much more detail. And people are obligated to meet the standard because of the policy, right? So the policy requires people to meet the standard. And then we provide guidelines, and guidelines are not required or mandatory. We simply tell people, if you follow this guideline, we are telling you already it meets the standard, which is consistent with the policy. And so that's that 3-tier approach. The 2 parts, one, we want to change slowly because it requires board ratification. One, you change more quickly. That would be the standard, and you're still obligated to meet both. And then we produce guidelines so that people can say, well, look, if I don't know what to do, I can always follow the guideline, and I know that the guideline puts me in an okay place.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So just making sure that's out there. So thank you.
Then I agree with you, Sophia.
Okay.
Awesome. All right. You're good? I think this actually, oh, you're good? Okay. This thing actually brings up a point that maybe we need to establish some more, I don't know, more informational ideas about using AI, which is, I think, more of a a function of your office, Michael, as opposed to a function of this committee, right? And I know that things are certainly being done at the campus level, certainly in the CSUs. I'm not sure about CT State, but coordinating that and maybe having a centralized calendar of when people can attend some of those sessions. I know that various people in various places are making talks about AI, usage of AI, these kinds of things. I want to be clear, none of this is the adoption of this board or system office. This is really from the bottom up, right? This is from the campuses. But there are good information. There are good sources of information in those various meetings, whatever you want to call them, conferences, Zooms, whatever. And maybe it'd be worthwhile collating that information centrally.
Okay. I mean, I have to think about that because, I just because it's consistent with what you said. I do not want to step on creative activity that's taking place across the various
No,
campuses.
I think this is more just lifting it up. Yeah, this is more just making people aware of like, hey, that your peers are doing other things here, and none of this even meets the level of guidelines yet. I mean, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, but certainly it's not the intention. The intention is to disseminate ideas, as Sophia was saying, about how some of these things can be used in various parts of people's day to day. Okay. Great. And again, I imagine you're trying to guide this to the same kind of timeline of finishing this up.
Yeah, but if one of them is subject or has a risk of getting delayed, it's this second one, right? Because it's the one there's a lot of community interest and passion around, and if we've missed the mark in parts of the policy, we're going to hear about it, and that may cause us, more substantive rewrites.
Yeah,
but I haven't heard anything yet.
Yeah, and if we need to, we could do it, in another forum or in this meeting or whatever, right? Like, I want to make sure people's concerns are aired because, certainly we're playing catch up. I mean,
Yes.
it should escape nobody that many other campuses and systems throughout the country have policy. Whether they're good or bad is, up for debate. But the fact that we don't have any means we are behind the ball. We need to be on the ball protecting students, number one, right? Okay, good. Anything else on policies, Michael?
No.
Okay, so I think that does it for the public section of this meeting. So before I call for a motion to go to executive session, let me state that the committee will move to executive session for the purpose of discussing matters under Connecticut General Statute 1-200-6C. No votes will be taken in executive session. The committee asks that CFO Blanchard, CIO Michael Mundrain join the committee in executive session. Additionally, there'll be no discussion, action, or votes by the committee following executive session. The only action following executive session will be a declaration of adjournment by the chair. Therefore, allow me to call for a motion to move to executive session for the purposes I have described and to adjourn by my declaration as committee chair when that discussion in executive session is concluded. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. The open portion of our meeting has concluded. The live stream will be stopped.
Live stream is stopped.
Thank you so much, Pam.
Okay.